What in the world is going on here? Thomas Miller's voice filled the vast bedroom as he pushed open the heavy oak door. He had returned from a week-long trip, expecting silence, the same sterile emptiness that had haunted his mansion for years. Instead, his sharp lawyer's eyes froze on something entirely out of place. On his bed, his private sanctuary where no one else had set foot since his wife's passing, lay a little black girl no older than 6. Her tiny body curled into the thick white sheets, her soaked dress clinging to her frame. In her arms, she held not a child, but a battered stuffed bear, its fur worn thin, one button eye missing, the seams barely holding. She clutched it to her chest as though it were the last piece of safety in the world. Thomas stepped inside slowly, his polished shoes sinking into the thick carpet. The girl stirred, blinking awake. Her eyes widened when she saw him, panic flashing across her face. She pulled the bear tighter, her knuckles turning white. "We'll leave right away," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just don't take Teddy from me." Thomas froze. He had expected an intruder's excuses, not a child's desperate plea. His instinct told him to call security. After all, this was trespassing. But as he looked at her, something in his chest shifted. She was just a little girl, clinging to a broken toy like it was her entire world. He thought of his own daughter, gone for years, who used to sleep every night with a pink rabbit doll tucked under her arm. "What's your name?" His voice was deep, steady, though softer than usual. The girl hesitated, her lips quivering. "Anna," she finally said. "I'm 6. She buried her face against the bear's ragged head, muffling the rest of her words. "Teddy keeps me safe." Thomas let out a slow breath, adjusting his glasses. He knelt slightly so his towering frame would seem less threatening. "Anna, you understand you're in my house, right? How did you get in here?" Her small voice wavered. But she answered. "The garage door was open. It was raining too hard. I was cold. Teddy was cold too. We just needed a place to sleep. Just for tonight." The words, simple yet raw, struck him harder than any testimony he had heard in court. He glanced at her thin arms, the water stains on her dress, the dirt on her shoes. She had walked through the storm with nothing but a stuffed bear, and somehow ended up in the home of one of the wealthiest men in the city. Thomas straightened, fighting to maintain his composure. His instincts warred with his heart. "You shouldn't be here," he said firmly, though not unkindly. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but her chin lifted with a stubbornness beyond her years. "Then we'll go. But Teddy stays with me. Nobody can take him away." For a moment, Thomas said nothing. He only stared at the trembling child on his bed. His logical side told him to pick up the phone. Call the authorities. Let social services deal with this. But the image of his own daughter flashed before him, a memory of her standing in this very room, clutching her rabbit doll, smiling up at him. His voice softened. "I'm not here to take your bear, Anna." She blinked, surprised. "You're not?" He shook his head. "No. But I do need to know why a little girl is wandering in the rain at night. Where are your parents?" Anna pressed her face into Teddy's fur. "Gone, all gone." Her voice cracked. I don't want to talk about it. If this moment touched your heart, I would love to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments where you are watching from. If you enjoyed the story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the next one. Thomas's chest tightened. He knew that tone. It was the sound of loss, too heavy for a child to carry. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful to keep his distance. "Anna, you can stay here tonight. Just tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure something out." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You promise?" "I promise." The words surprised even him. But once spoken, he couldn't take them back. Anna relaxed just a little, hugging Teddy closer. Her eyes fluttered shut again, exhaustion winning the battle against fear. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, the broken bear still locked in her arms. Thomas remained seated, staring at the fragile figure before him. For years, his house had been nothing more than glass, steel, and silence. Tonight, For the first time, it held something else, a reminder of innocence, of trust, of a love he thought was lost forever. He leaned back, whispering under his breath, "What am I supposed to do with you, Anna?" But she didn't answer. She was already lost to sleep, clinging to her ragged bear, as though it were the key to surviving the world. And Thomas, a man who had once sworn never to let his heart open again, found himself unable to look away. The mansion was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Thomas stood by the window of his bedroom, long after Anna had drifted back into sleep, still curled around her stuffed bear. Outside, the rain lashed against the glass, each drop tapping like a reminder of the night that had led her here. He loosened his tie, sank into the leather chair near the bed, and for the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him. It was not comfort, not yet, but curiosity, concern, and a gnawing sense of recognition. Anna murmured in her sleep, her small brow furrowing as if the storm outside had followed her into her dreams. Thomas watched her clutch the ragged bear tighter, her lips trembling as she whispered something too faint for him to catch. He leaned forward, listening closely. This time the words came clearer. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me." His chest tightened. Those words had once been spoken to him too by his late daughter. The last night he saw her alive. He had promised to be home early, but he hadn't kept that promise. The memory stabbed at him like a knife. He shook his head, forcing himself to breathe. This girl was not his daughter, but the resemblance in her desperation was undeniable. At dawn, Thomas rose quietly. The light poured through the tall windows, washing the room in pale gold. Anna stirred, blinking against the brightness. She sat up suddenly, clutching Teddy to her chest, her wide eyes darting around the unfamiliar room. "You're still here," she whispered, half to herself, half in disbelief. "Yes," Thomas replied calmly. "And so are you." He crossed his arms, watching her carefully. "Now, Anna, it's time you told me where you came from." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked down at Teddy, as if the bear might shield her from the question. "We didn't belong anywhere," she murmured. "Anna," Thomas said gently but firmly, "you can't expect me to help if you don't tell me the truth." For a long moment, she was silent. Then, in halting words, she began to speak. She told him about her mother, how she had once sung lullabies at night, her hands always warm. But when Anna was only 4, her mother fell ill after giving birth to twin boys. The illness worsened, and within weeks, her mother was gone. Anna remembered sitting in the corner of the room with Teddy while men carried the body away. Her father changed after that. "He was nice before," Anna whispered, her voice cracking, "but then he started drinking. He yelled a lot. Sometimes he hit things. Not me, not at first. But walls, chairs. He broke Teddy's ear once." She brushed her fingers across the missing button eye of the bear, as if tracing the memory of that night. "And then he hit people too. The police took him away." Thomas listened without interruption, his jaw tightening at each detail. He had defended men like her father in court before, heard the excuses they gave. But hearing it from a child made it sound uglier, more unforgivable. Anna continued. Social services placed her and her baby brothers with her uncle and aunt. At first, she thought it might be safe, but it was not. The uncle drank heavily. The aunt cared only about the government money. They had parties all the time, Anna said. Music so loud my brothers cried. I asked for milk, and they told me to shut up. I tried to rock the babies myself. Sometimes they didn't eat all day. Her voice lowered, trembling. One night, my brother got sick. He was burning up, but they wouldn't help. I begged for money for medicine. My uncle slapped me. She turned her face, and Thomas noticed a faint scar near her temple, small but sharp. So I left. I took Teddy and the boys. It was raining, and I didn't know where to go. We walked and walked until I saw your house. The garage door was open. I thought, Maybe God left it open for me. Her story ended there, the room falling into silence heavy as stone. Thomas exhaled slowly, his eyes fixed on the child hugging her broken bear. He had seen abandoned children in court cases, had fought for custody rights, had even won battles that shaped laws. But this was different. This was no file on his desk, no name on a case. This was a living, breathing child in his house, staring at him with eyes too old for her years. "You did the right thing leaving that house," he said finally. His voice was low, controlled, but filled with an edge of emotion he could not disguise. "No child should suffer what you've been through." Anna tilted her head, uncertain. "So, you're not going to call the police?" Thomas hesitated. He had every legal right to report her. Yet the thought of handing her back to a system that had already failed her gnawed at him. He shook his head. "Not yet. For now, you'll stay here. But only until we figure out the best way forward." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" He nodded, more firmly this time. "But Anna, you have to promise me something. No more running. You're safe here." "Oh." She hugged Teddy tighter, her small face brightening just a little. "Teddy and I promise." For the first time, Thomas allowed himself a faint smile. "Good. Then let's get you something to eat. You look like you haven't had a real meal in days." Anna's stomach growled loudly, betraying her before she could answer. Her cheeks flushed. Thomas chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Come on. The kitchen's this way." They walked down the grand staircase together, the child's small hand dragging along the polished banister, while Thomas's tall frame moved beside her. In the kitchen, the stainless steel counters gleamed. Thomas, who rarely set foot there, opened the refrigerator awkwardly. He pulled out eggs, bread, and a carton of milk. Anna watched him, her suspicion returning. "You cook?" "Not very well," he admitted. He cracked an egg too hard, splattering yolk across the counter. Anna giggled softly, the sound surprising both of them. "You're clumsy," she teased, hugging Teddy to her chest. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Don't get used to it. Lawyers don't usually cook breakfast." But as he fumbled through frying eggs and toasting bread, Anna sat at the table, swinging her legs and watching him with wide eyes. For a child who had known only neglect, the sight of an adult trying even poorly to care for her was something close to miraculous. When the plate was finally set before her, she whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Miller." Thomas paused, looking at her small hands breaking the toast into pieces, feeding one to Teddy as if the bear deserved a share. He nodded. "Eat, Anna. You'll need your strength." For the first time in years, the mansion's kitchen was not silent. The clinking of forks, the faint hum of laughter, and the rustle of a stuffed bear against a little girl's cheek filled the air. And in that simple moment, Thomas realized something he hadn't in a very long time. His house was no longer empty. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the dining hall, casting long golden stripes across the polished oak table. Thomas sat with his coffee, the newspaper open before him, but his eyes lingered on the girl sitting opposite. Anna hunched over her plate, chewing slowly, one arm curled protectively around the ragged bear in her lap. Every few minutes she glanced up, wary, as though expecting to be told to leave at any moment. Thomas lowered his paper. "You don't have to guard that bear so closely," he said, his tone calm. Anna froze mid-bite. "People take things," she murmured, not looking up. "If I don't hold him, someone might." He exhaled softly. "No one in this house will take him from you, Anna. I promise." Her gaze flickered to his face, searching for any hint of deception. After a long pause, she nodded, loosening her grip slightly but never fully releasing the bear. Thomas noticed that. Even in safety, she couldn't let go. After breakfast, he escorted her into the living room, its high ceiling echoing with silence. A fireplace stood cold and unused, framed by shelves lined with books and framed photos. Most were of his late wife and daughter, their smiles frozen in time. Thomas hesitated before stepping in. This room was a shrine to a past he rarely let anyone see. Anna wandered toward the photos, her small fingers tracing the edge of a silver frame. "Is this your little girl?" she asked softly. Thomas's chest tightened. He walked over, standing behind her. The picture showed a bright-eyed girl with curly hair, no older than Anna, holding a pink stuffed rabbit. His throat constricted. "Yes," he said quietly. "Her name was Lily." Anna hugged Teddy closer, lowering her eyes. "She looks happy." She was. His voice broke slightly. He cleared his throat, forcing composure. "She and her mother, they died in an accident a long time ago." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Anna tilted her head, her young face serious. "That's why you looked sad last night." Thomas blinked. "What do you mean? When you told me not to worry in the hospital, you were crying." "I saw." Her tone wasn't accusing, just factual, a child's sharp observation. He sat down heavily in the armchair, rubbing his temples. "I don't cry, Anna. Not anymore. But maybe last night I did." She climbed onto the couch opposite him, her small legs swinging. "It's okay to cry," she said simply. "Teddy says crying makes room for the brave part of your heart to grow." Thomas almost laughed, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Teddy's a wise bear." Anna grinned, hugging the toy tighter. For the first time, her smile didn't look guarded, yet even as warmth flickered between them, Thomas's lawyer instincts stirred. This was not sustainable. He could not keep a child here indefinitely. Questions would come: neighbors, staff, the authorities. Already his conscience nagged at him. He needed to call someone, report this properly. That was the law, and yet, the thought of sending Anna back into a system that had already failed her gnawed at him. "Anna," he said, leaning forward, "I need you to understand something. Keeping you here, it's not simple. There are rules, laws, people who decide where children should live. If they find you here, I'll run." Her response was instant, fierce. Thomas frowned. "Run? To where?" "Anywhere." Her small chin jutted forward stubbornly. "I'm not going back to Uncle's house. I won't." He yells. "He hurts. And Aunt only cares about money. If they send me back, I'll take Teddy and run again." "Oh." Her defiance struck him, this fragile child speaking with the conviction of someone far older. He leaned back, studying her. "You can't live on running forever, Anna. You need a home." She hugged Teddy, her voice low but steady. "This feels like a home, for the first time since Mama left." The words pierced deeper than she knew. Thomas's carefully built defenses trembled. He rose abruptly, pacing toward the window. Outside, the manicured garden stretched wide, sunlight gleaming on the fountain, yet all he saw was a choice looming larger than any case he had argued in court. Could he keep her here, against the system's rules, risking scandal, questions, and legal battles? Or should he hand her over to the authorities and let her fate rest in their hands? "Mr. Miller," Anna's voice pulled him back. She was watching him, her eyes wide, almost pleading. "If you send me away, Teddy says I'll never smile again." He turned, caught between reason and compassion. He should have corrected her. Teddy couldn't speak, couldn't know such things, but when he met her gaze, he saw a reflection of Lily's eyes, wide and trusting. He lowered his head, his voice rough. "No one is sending you away today." Anna's shoulders relaxed. She slid off the couch, padded across the carpet, and stood by his chair. After a moment of hesitation, she placed Teddy gently in his lap. Thomas looked down at the worn toy, astonished. The stitches were frayed, the fur nearly gone. Yet the bear carried the weight of her trust. "He likes you," Anna said softly. "That means I can trust you too." Thomas swallowed hard, his hand resting awkwardly on the stuffed bear. For years he had lived behind walls of grief, certain nothing could breach them. But here was a child, with nothing but a broken toy, tearing through those defenses with startling ease. That night, as Anna curled up once more in the guest room bed, Teddy tucked securely in her arms, Thomas lingered in the hallway. He should have felt burdened, but instead, for the first time in a decade, he felt something dangerously close to hope. The house had settled into silence. the kind that came only in the deep hours of night. The grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight, each chime echoing through the empty corridors of the mansion. Thomas sat alone in his study, the glow of a single lamp spilling across stacks of files and untouched legal briefs. His mind should have been on contracts and court schedules, but it wasn't. It kept drifting upstairs, to the child asleep in his guest room with her stuffed bear. He rubbed his temples, sighing. What was he doing? He was a lawyer, a man of the law. He knew the protocols. Call child services, let the system handle it. And yet, every time he pictured Anna back in the hands of people who had failed her so cruelly, his chest constricted. He told himself it was temporary, but he knew better. This wasn't just a detour in his life, it was the beginning of something that could change everything. Then came the sound. A sharp, strangled cry pierced the quiet, followed by the frantic thud of small feet against the floorboards. Thomas was on his feet instantly, his heart lurching as he bolted from the study. He took the stairs 2 at a time, the echoes of her cries growing louder. "Anna?" he called, his voice breaking through the dark hallway. He burst into the guest room and froze. Anna was sitting upright in the bed, her tiny body trembling. Teddy clutched so tightly against her chest that her knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she gasped for air between sobs. "No, don't take him. Don't leave me alone," she cried, thrashing as though fighting invisible hands. Thomas rushed forward, kneeling at the edge of the bed. "Anna, it's all right. You're safe. It's me, Thomas. You're safe here." Her eyes snapped open, wild and glassy. For a moment, she didn't see him, only shadows of her nightmare. She kicked back, curling tighter into herself. "Go away. Don't hurt me." The words cut deep, sharper than any insult he'd endured in a courtroom. His voice softened, trembling despite himself. "Anna, I won't hurt you. I swear to you, no one will touch you here. You're safe." She blinked, her breathing ragged, until his face finally came into focus. Recognition flickered in her gaze, and her sobs broke into hiccuping whimpers. Slowly, hesitantly, she whispered, "Promise." "I promise," he said without hesitation. For the first time, she released her death grip on Teddy just enough to reach out with one hand. Small, fragile fingers brushed his sleeve, clutching him as though testing if he was real. Thomas covered her hand gently with his own. "I'm here," he murmured, "and I'm not going anywhere." The fight drained from her body, replaced by exhaustion. She sagged against the pillow, but her hand didn't let go of his sleeve. Thomas sat down on the edge of the bed, letting her hold him as she drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. Her whispers came again, soft and broken. The fire, the yelling. He was so mad, he threw Teddy. I thought he'd throw me too." Thomas's stomach knotted. He had suspected abuse, but hearing her recount fragments of it tore something inside him. He smoothed back her damp curls, his jaw tightening. "No one is going to throw you ever again," he said, his voice firm, almost a vow. Minutes turned into an hour as he stayed there, the girl clinging to his sleeve, the bear wedged between them like a fragile peace treaty. At last, her breathing steadied, her grip loosening as true sleep reclaimed her. Thomas sat still, watching her chest rise and fall. He knew he should pull away, retreat to his own room, but he couldn't, not yet. Finally, he stood, careful not to wake her, and crossed to the window. Rain streaked the glass outside, the storm still lingering over the city. He looked back at the child curled in his bed, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the bedside lamp. He whispered to himself, "What am I getting into?" Yet even as he asked the question, he already knew the answer. He was crossing a line he had sworn never to cross again. He was letting someone in. And though it terrified him, he couldn't turn back now. Downstairs, the housekeeper Helen Carter arrived early, as she always did when storms rattled the windows. She paused at the sight of Thomas in the hallway outside the guest room. "You're awake?" she asked softly, her voice lined with concern. Thomas nodded, adjusting his tie though he hadn't slept. "She had a nightmare," he said simply. Helen's brow furrowed. "She?" Thomas hesitated, then gestured toward the door. "Her name is Anna. She..." She needed a place to stay last night. Helen studied him with sharp, knowing eyes. She had worked for the Miller family long enough to recognize when Thomas's heart betrayed his logic. She only nodded. Then she'll need breakfast in the morning, and clean clothes. Children shouldn't feel like guests, sir. They should feel like they belong. Thomas looked at her, startled by her matter-of-fact tone. Belong. The word lingered as he glanced back at the closed door. Later, as dawn crept across the sky, Anna stirred again. She found Thomas still near the bed, half dozing in the chair. She blinked, surprised. You stayed. He rubbed his eyes, managing a tired smile. I said I would. Mice. She clutched Teddy closer and whispered, nobody ever keeps promises. He leaned forward, his voice steady. Then maybe it's time someone did. The day began with an unease that Thomas couldn't shake. He had tried to distract himself with phone calls, reviewing briefs, and answering impatient clients. But the sound of Anna's fragile voice lingered in his ears. Her nightmare had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Every time he saw her clutch that tattered bear, he wondered what fresh horrors had driven her into his home. By mid-morning, Anna sat quietly at the breakfast table, picking at scrambled eggs Helen had made. Her eyes were ringed with shadows, and her usual guarded expression was even more distant than before. She cradled Teddy on her lap, whispering to him occasionally, as though seeking comfort. Thomas watched from the other end of the table, uneaten toast on his plate, coffee cooling in his hand. You didn't sleep much, did you? He asked finally. Anna shrugged, her shoulders small beneath the oversized sweater Helen had found for her. Teddy kept me safe, she murmured, not meeting his eyes. But my stomach hurts. Thomas frowned. How long have you been feeling that way? She pressed her palm to her side, wincing. Since yesterday. But it's okay. I'll be fine. Mun. It was the kind of answer that cut straight through him, words of a child too used to ignoring her own pain. He stood abruptly, setting his coffee down. No, it's not okay. We're going to the hospital. Anna stiffened, her fork clattering against the plate. No. Please don't take me there. They'll find me. They'll send me back. Her eyes widened with panic, her small hands gripping Teddy so tightly the seams strained. Thomas crouched beside her chair, lowering his voice. Listen to me. Anna, no one is going to take you from here. But if something's wrong, we can't ignore it. You need a doctor. She shook her head violently, tears springing to her eyes. You don't understand. Hospitals mean people asking questions, people writing things down. And then the social workers come. They'll split me and Teddy apart. Thomas hesitated, knowing she wasn't entirely wrong. His mind raced with the possibilities, mandated reporters, paperwork, the risk of her ending up back in the system. But when he looked into her face, pale, tired, and far too old for her years, his choice became clear. He had built his life on following rules, but this time, compassion would come first. He placed his hand over hers, steadying her trembling fingers. I'll be with you the entire time. They can ask questions, but I'll answer them. And Teddy stays with you. I'll make sure of it. Anna searched his face for any sign of dishonesty. Slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. Promise? I promise. The drive to the hospital was silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional squeak of Teddy's worn seams as Anna hugged him. She sat in the back seat, her knees pulled up, eyes darting nervously to every passing building. Thomas kept glancing in the mirror, a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt since rushing his wife and daughter to the ER years ago. The memories collided with the present until he gripped the wheel harder just to steady himself. At the hospital, fluorescent lights glared down on the polished floors. The smell of antiseptic hit Thomas instantly, sharp and familiar. And for a moment, he froze in the entrance. His mind flooded with the image of his wife's pale face, his daughter's limp hand. He swallowed hard, forcing the memories back. This was not then. This was now. And now, a little girl needed him. A nurse at the front desk looked up. Can I help you? Thomas straightened, his professional composure returning like armor. Yes. This is Anna. She's been having abdominal pain since yesterday. She needs to be seen. The nurse glanced at Anna, who clutched Teddy tightly and pressed against Thomas's side. We'll need some basic information. I'll handle the forms, Thomas said quickly, shielding Anna from the clipboard. Within minutes, they were in an examination room. Anna perched nervously on the paper-covered bed, her eyes darting to every instrument. Thomas pulled a chair beside her, his hand resting on the bed near hers. Dr. Miller, not related to Thomas, but a kind-eyed pediatrician, entered, offering a gentle smile. Hello, Anna. I hear you've got a tummy ache. Anna hugged Teddy and gave a quick nod, her lips pressed tight. Dr. Miller knelt, so his eyes were level with hers. Can Teddy help me check? Sometimes stuffed animals make brave assistants. Anna's eyes softened just slightly. She placed Teddy on her lap, holding his paw out as though giving permission. The doctor chuckled softly and began his gentle exam. As the minutes passed, Thomas watched, tense but silent. Finally, the doctor looked up. It doesn't seem serious, likely a combination of stress and poor diet, but we'll run a few tests to be sure. Relief washed over Thomas, though he kept his face neutral. Thank you, doctor. Anna, however, was still tense. When a nurse came to draw blood, she panicked, clutching Teddy to her chest. No, don't hurt me, she cried. Thomas moved instantly, kneeling beside her. Anna, listen to me. No one is here to hurt you. They just need to check to make sure you're healthy. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Will you stay? I'll stay right here, he promised. And I won't let go of your hand. Reluctantly, she extended her arm, burying her face in Teddy's fur. Thomas held her free hand tightly as the nurse worked quickly. When it was over, Anna peeked up, surprised to see it done. She looked at Thomas with wide, tearful eyes. You didn't let go, she whispered. I said I wouldn't, he replied softly. The rest of the visit passed more calmly, though Anna never released Teddy or Thomas's hand. When the tests came back normal, Dr. Miller assured them she just needed rest, nutritious food, and a stable environment. On the drive back, Anna leaned against the seat, Teddy nestled under her chin. She was quiet, but calmer. At a stoplight, she whispered, Nobody's ever stayed before. Thomas glanced at her through the mirror. Then maybe it's time someone did. As the mansion came into view, Thomas felt something shift. He had set out to protect himself from ever caring again, from ever losing again. Yet here he was, making promises to a child who had already stitched herself into the cracks of his broken heart. By the time they returned from the hospital, the storm had passed, leaving the sky washed in pale blue. The driveway glistened with puddles, and the mansion's tall windows reflected the quiet dawn. Anna clutched Teddy as Thomas led her inside, her small hand gripping his sleeve as though afraid the ground beneath her might vanish if she let go. Helen, the housekeeper, was waiting in the foyer, her brows lifted as she spotted the pair. Well, you look like you've both been through a war, she said gently. Thomas handed her his coat and gave a curt nod. We had to make a hospital trip. She's fine. Just exhausted. Anna pressed against his side, peeking warily at Helen. The older woman crouched slightly, softening her tone. Would you like some hot cocoa, sweetheart? Anna blinked, surprised by the kindness, then shook her head quickly. I'm fine. Teddy doesn't drink cocoa. Helen gave Thomas a look, half concern, half curiosity, but said nothing more. She disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving them in the vast silence of the entry hall. Thomas crouched, so he was eye level with Anna. You heard the doctor. You need rest and good meals. So here's the deal. Anna's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What deal? You and Teddy can stay here. But only if you promise to trust me enough to follow the rules. That means eating when you're given food, resting when you need to, and no sneaking out into the storm again. She hugged Teddy tighter, her lips pursing. People always make rules to send you away later. His chest tightened. She said it like a fact, not a fear. Anna, he said slowly, I'm not making rules to send you away. I'm making them so you'll be safe here. Uh, she studied his face for a long moment, eyes searching as though weighing the truth of his words. Finally, she nodded once. Teddy says we can try. Thomas let out a slow breath. Then it's a deal. Later that morning, Helen served oatmeal with honey and warm bread in the sunlit breakfast room. Thomas sat at the table, watching as Anna eyed the bowl suspiciously. She poked at it with her spoon, then glanced at Teddy. You think it's safe? She whispered to the bear. Thomas arched a brow. If Teddy's unsure, maybe I should taste it first. He pulled the bowl toward himself, scooped a spoonful, and ate it. Not poisoned, he declared solemnly. Anna's lips twitched, and for the first time, a small giggle slipped out. She pulled the bowl back and began to eat slowly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the day stretched on, Anna explored cautiously. She wandered the grand library, her small fingers trailing over the spines of books too heavy for her to lift. She lingered in the garden, staring at the fountain with wide eyes, as though it were a treasure chest come to life. All the while, Teddy never left her arms. Thomas watched from a distance, noting every glance over her shoulder, every flinch at sudden noises. Trust, he realized, was not something Anna gave easily. But when she spotted him standing in the doorway, she didn't hide. Instead, she walked up, tugging lightly at his sleeve. Can Teddy and I stay here again tonight? She asked softly. Thomas looked down at her, the weight of her question heavy in his chest. She wasn't asking for forever, not even for tomorrow, just for one more night of safety. He knelt, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. Yes, Anna, you and Teddy can stay here tonight, and tomorrow, we'll figure out what comes next. Her face brightened, a fragile smile breaking through. She nodded, then whispered, Thank you, Mr. Miller. Nah. As night fell, Thomas stood outside her room once more, listening to the soft murmur of her voice as she spoke to Teddy before drifting to sleep. He knew the coming days would bring questions, challenges, and decisions he wasn't ready for. But as he watched her small figure curled safely in bed, one thing became clear. For the first time in years, his house felt alive. And for the first time in years, his heart dared to trust again. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Miller mansion, lighting the grand dining room in soft gold. For once, the table wasn't empty. Anna sat on one of the tall chairs, her legs swinging beneath her. Teddy perched proudly beside her plate like an honored guest. Helen placed a glass of orange juice before her, smiling as she adjusted the napkin at Anna's side. Thomas watched from across the table, coffee in hand, studying the child as though she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. She seemed calmer this morning, though every now and then her eyes darted toward the door, as if ready to run should anyone unfamiliar appear. You slept better? Thomas asked, his voice even. Anna nodded, taking a bite of toast. Teddy kept the bad dreams away. She gave the bear a reassuring pat, then added, And because you stayed close. Hi. Thomas hesitated at her words, then nodded. Good. That's how it should be. Helen chuckled softly. Children don't usually compliment their guardians so easily, Mr. Miller. She must trust you. Thomas glanced at Anna, who was buttering her toast with a concentration far too serious for a 6-year-old. Trust it was fragile, like glass, and he knew it could shatter with one wrong move. After breakfast, Thomas retreated to his study for work, but his focus faltered. Contracts blurred on the page, and client calls seemed trivial. His mind kept circling back to the small figure, now wandering the halls of his home. He had spent years drowning in silence, punishing himself with memories. Now, laughter hesitant but real echoed faintly down the corridor. By mid-afternoon, Thomas found Anna in the garden. The fountain's water sparkled under the sun, and Anna was crouched beside it, dipping Teddy's worn paw into the cool stream. She looked up as he approached, her eyes wary but hopeful. Does Teddy like the fountain? Thomas asked lightly. Anna nodded. He says it's magic. Mama used to tell me fountains could grant wishes. Thomas sat on the bench nearby, watching her. And what do you wish for, Anna? She hugged the bear, her small brow furrowing. A home where nobody yells? a bed that's always warm, and someone who doesn't leave. She paused, then whispered, "Do you think fountains make those wishes real?" His throat tightened. He wanted to tell her yes, but he had seen too much of the world to lie so easily. "Sometimes," he said finally. "But sometimes, it takes people to make wishes real." Anna studied him for a long moment, then turned back to the fountain. "Then maybe Teddy and I will wish for you." The words hit him harder than he expected. He looked away, staring at the water's reflection. She was just a child, clinging to hope like it was oxygen. But deep inside, he felt something shift, a crack in the walls he had built. That evening, Helen prepared a simple dinner: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Thomas hadn't shared a meal with anyone at his table in years. The sight of Anna carefully cutting her food, occasionally feeding Teddy bites as though he could taste them, tugged at something in him he thought long dead. After the plates were cleared, Anna asked quietly, "Can I see more pictures of Lily?" Thomas stiffened, his hand pausing on his glass of water. "Why?" "She looks happy," Anna said softly. "I want to know what she liked. Maybe Teddy can be friends with her rabbit." Thomas exhaled slowly, rising from the table. He retrieved a photo album from the living room shelf, his hands shaking slightly as he placed it before her. Anna turned the pages carefully, eyes wide with wonder at the smiling child frozen in each frame. "She liked pink," Thomas said quietly, almost to himself. "She never went anywhere without that rabbit. And she loved ice cream chocolate chip mint." Anna smiled, hugging Teddy close. "Then maybe she and I would have been friends." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Thomas looked at her, this small stranger who had entered his house and unsettled every corner of his heart. Shadows of the past lingered in every photograph, but now, sitting beside him, was the fragile possibility of a future. Later that night, as Thomas stood at his office window, he saw Anna running across the lawn with Teddy, her laughter faint but real. The sound drifted up through the glass, carrying with it a truth he couldn't ignore. His house had once been filled with sorrow. Now, bit by bit, it was learning to breathe again. The following morning began quietly enough. Thomas was in his study, phone pressed to his ear as he discussed a high-stakes case with a client. His voice was steady, deliberate, the way it always was in the courtroom. Yet even as he spoke, the faint sound of laughter floated down the hallway, Anna's laughter. She was in the kitchen with Helen, feeding Teddy spoonfuls of oatmeal as though the bear were a living guest at the breakfast table. For a fleeting moment, Thomas allowed himself to smile, but the knock at the door shattered the calm. Firm. Official. A sound that carried authority. Helen appeared in the study doorway, her face tight. "Mr. Miller, there's someone here to see you." "From Child Protective Services." Thomas's stomach dropped. He set his phone aside and rose, his lawyer's mask sliding into place. "Show them in." In the foyer stood a woman in her 40s, professional yet approachable, with a neat bun and a leather satchel over her shoulder. She extended her hand. "Mary Collins, Child Protective Services. We received a report of a child in your care." Thomas shook her hand firmly. "Thomas Miller?" "Yes. She came to my home a few nights ago. Under unusual circumstances. I was going to contact your office, but..." Her eyes sharpened. "But you didn't." He paused, then admitted, "Not yet. I wanted to be sure she was safe before handing her over to a system that's already failed her." "Oh." Mary studied him, then glanced around the expansive foyer, her gaze settling on the staircase where Anna now stood halfway down, Teddy in her arms. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of the stranger. Instinctively, she stepped back, pressing herself against the banister, as if ready to flee. "Anna?" Mary's voice softened. "My name is Mary. I'm here to make sure you're all right." Anna's grip on Teddy tightened. "You're here to take me away." Thomas stepped forward quickly, his voice firm but calm. "No one is taking you anywhere, Anna. You're safe." He turned back to Mary, his jaw tightening. "She's been through enough. Approach her slowly." Mary nodded, softening her tone further. "Anna, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk. Anna's eyes darted to Thomas, her voice trembling. If I talk to her, will you stay? Thomas met her gaze. I'll stay right here. Slowly, cautiously, Anna descended the stairs. She sat on the bottom step, Teddy perched on her lap like a shield. Mary knelt a few feet away. Do you like it here, Anna? Mary asked gently. Anna hesitated, then nodded. It's quiet. Nobody yells. And Mr. Miller? He stayed when I had a nightmare. Thomas felt something twist in his chest at her words. Mary jotted a note in her pad. And do you feel safe here? Anna hugged Teddy. Safer than anywhere else. Mary closed her pad, then stood, her eyes meeting Thomas's. I'll need to do a full evaluation, of course. Background checks, home visits, follow-ups. But I'll say this much, she trusts you, and trust is hard to come by. Anna's small voice broke the silence. Please don't take me away. Teddy says, if we leave again, my smile will break. Mary's face softened. She glanced at Thomas, then back at Anna. No one's taking you today. Relief washed over Anna's face, though she didn't loosen her grip on Teddy. After Mary left, Thomas escorted Anna back to the kitchen. She sat at the table, her eyes downcast. She'll come back, won't she? Yes, Thomas admitted. She has to. It's her job to make sure you're safe. Anna bit her lip. And what if she decides I'm not safe here? Thomas knelt beside her, his voice steady, unyielding. Then she'll have to fight me in court. And I don't lose easily. For the first time since Mary's visit, Anna smiled faintly. Then Teddy says we'll be okay. Thomas ruffled her curls lightly. Then Teddy's right. Yet as he walked back to his study, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on him. He had promised Anna safety, but promises meant nothing without action. If the system tried to take her, he would have to fight not just as a lawyer, but as a man who had finally found someone worth breaking his silence for. The days that followed Mary Cullen's visit were tense but manageable. Anna began to relax into a rhythm breakfast with Helen, afternoons in the garden, evenings with Thomas in the library where she insisted on reading to Teddy from picture books. For a fleeting moment, Thomas allowed himself to believe stability was possible. That illusion ended one late afternoon when the sound of shouting erupted at the front gate. Thomas, reviewing documents in his study, froze as Helen rushed in, her face pale. Mr. Miller, there are people at the gate demanding to see Anna. They say they're family. Thomas rose instantly, his jaw tightening. He strode through the hall toward the front entrance, where raised voices echoed off the marble floor. Outside, beyond the wrought iron gates, stood a man and a woman. The man reeked of roughness, even from a distance, unkempt hair, bloodshot eyes, a restless twitch in his movements. The woman beside him was lean, her expression sour, her arms crossed as though daring anyone to defy her. Open this gate, the man roared. That's my daughter in there, and you've got no right keeping her. Thomas's blood chilled. Anna's father. Before he could respond, small footsteps pattered behind him. Mr. Miller? Anna's voice was small, shaky. She clutched Teddy, peering past his side toward the commotion. The moment the man saw her, his face twisted into a grotesque smile. Anna, baby girl, come here. Daddy's here now. It's time to come home. Anna's eyes widened in terror. She stepped back, pressing into Thomas's leg, her voice barely a whisper. No, I don't want to. Thomas placed a protective arm in front of her, his voice like steel. You're not taking one step inside this property without a court order. The man slammed his fist against the gate. She's my blood. You can't keep her from me. Thomas's eyes narrowed. Blood doesn't make you a father. Love and responsibility do. And from what I've heard, you've offered her neither. The woman beside the man sneered. We're her family. You're just some rich lawyer playing hero. Anna's trembling voice broke through. I don't want to go back. Please don't make me. She buried her face in Thomas's side. Teddy crushed between them. That was enough. Thomas stepped forward, his stance tall, commanding. If you want custody, You'll face me in court. Until then, you don't come near her." The man cursed, shouting threats as the woman tugged at his arm. But Thomas didn't flinch. He pressed the intercom button, his voice cold. "Security, escort them off the property, and notify me the moment they try to return." The gate slammed shut. The shouting faded into the distance. Inside the mansion, Anna clung to him, her small body trembling. "They'll take me," she whispered, eyes wet with fear. "They'll take me away from Teddy, and from you." Thomas crouched, looking into her tear-filled eyes. "No, Anna, not as long as I'm here. They'll have to go through me first." "You promise?" she asked again, desperate. "I promise," he said firmly. That night, after Anna finally drifted into a restless sleep, Thomas stood by the window of his study, staring out into the darkness. He knew what was coming. Hearings. Paperwork. Battles fought not in the streets, but in courtrooms. It was the arena he knew best. But this time it wasn't about clients or money. This time, it was about Anna. For the first time in years, Thomas felt the fire of purpose surge in his veins, not for his career, not for reputation, but for the fragile child who had chosen to trust him. He whispered to the night, as if vowing to the ghosts of his past, "You took my family once. You won't take her." The mansion had grown unusually quiet after the confrontation at the gate. Anna had barely spoken through dinner, pushing her food around the plate until Helen finally coaxed her into taking a few bites. Now she sat curled up on the couch in the library, Teddy pressed under her chin, as though he alone could shield her from the shadows. Thomas stood at the far end of the room, pacing slowly. His phone glowed in his hand as he spoke in a low, deliberate voice. "We'll file for emergency custody," he told his longtime colleague, Anna Parker, one of the most formidable attorneys in his firm. "The father will claim rights by blood, but will use his record: domestic violence, arrests, abandonment. He won't stand a chance if we press hard." Through the crackling speaker, Anna Parker replied, "Don't underestimate desperation, Thomas. Men like him don't care about the law until it bites them. Be prepared for him to push back in ways outside the courtroom." Thomas's gaze flicked to the small figure on the couch. Anna was pretending not to listen, but her shoulders stiffened at every word. Lowering his voice further, he said, "I'll do whatever it takes. She's not going back to him." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. For a moment he stood still, staring into the dim glow of the fireplace. Then, a small voice broke the silence. "Are they going to take me away?" Thomas turned. Anna's eyes were fixed on him, wide and glistening, her fingers tangled in Teddy's threadbare fur. "No," Thomas said firmly, crossing the room to kneel beside her. "Not if I can help it." Her lips trembled. "But he's my dad, and dads always win." The words sliced deeper than any cross-examination ever had. He shook his head slowly. "Not this time. Fathers are supposed to protect, not hurt. If he shows up in court, he'll face the truth. And I promise you, Anna, the truth is stronger than his lies." She searched his face, still doubtful. "People always say the truth matters. But when I told the truth before, no one listened." Thomas sat back, his heart tightening. He remembered the countless cases where the weak were silenced by power, where children's voices were drowned out by the machinery of the system. He had spent his career fighting battles for justice, but never had the stakes been this personal. He reached out, placing a steady hand on her small shoulder. "This time, Anna, I'll make sure they listen. You won't be alone in that courtroom. You'll have me and Teddy, of course." At that, a faint smile tugged at her lips. She hugged the bear closer, whispering into his worn ear, "Did you hear that, Teddy? We'll have a lawyer, Bear." Thomas chuckled softly, the tension in the room easing just a little. A very fierce one, I'm sure. Though, later, after Anna drifted upstairs with Helen's help, Thomas remained in the library, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on him. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, staring at the amber liquid as though it held answers. The flicker of firelight danced across the room, casting long shadows over the photographs on the mantel. Lily's face smiled back at him from within a frame, forever frozen in innocence. He lifted his glass slightly toward her photo, his voice low. I couldn't save you, but maybe I can save her. Upstairs, Anna lay awake despite the exhaustion tugging at her. She whispered to Teddy under the blankets, her voice barely audible. Do you think he means it? Do you think he'll fight for us? She pressed the bear tighter. I want to believe him. I really do. The house was silent again. But it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the silence before a storm, the kind Thomas Miller knew all too well. And this storm, he realized, would not be fought in his mansion's halls but in the courtroom, where truth, lies, and the fate of a fragile little girl would collide. The courthouse in downtown Boston loomed like a fortress of stone and glass. Its high columns and wide steps were meant to inspire reverence, but to Anna they felt like the walls of a trap. She clutched Teddy tightly in her arms as Thomas guided her up the steps. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her, but his eyes were already sharpened with focus, the gaze of a man stepping into battle. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Lawyers shuffled papers, clerks whispered instructions, and families huddled nervously on the benches. To Anna, it was a sea of strangers. She pressed closer to Thomas, her voice barely a whisper. Do we have to go in there? Thomas knelt slightly so his eyes met hers. Yes, Anna, but remember, this isn't just about him. This is about you, about your voice being heard. She hugged Teddy tighter. What if they don't listen? They never listened before. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder. They will this time. Because I'll make them. When they entered the courtroom, the man who claimed to be her father was already there, his greasy hair slicked back, his suit ill-fitting. He leaned toward his attorney, muttering something with a smirk. Beside him sat Anna's aunt and uncle, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of concern. But when Anna's eyes met theirs, she shrank back, pressing into Thomas's side. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Reynolds, a silver-haired man with a stern expression, took his seat. This hearing will address the custody of minor Anna Evans. Let's proceed. Anna's father's attorney rose first. His voice was smooth, confident. Your Honor, my client acknowledges his past mistakes but asserts his right as the biological father to care for his daughter. He has undergone counseling, secured steady employment, and is prepared to provide a stable home. Anna shifted uncomfortably, her knuckles white around Teddy. She wanted to shout that it wasn't true, that his home had been nothing but shouting, drinking, and fists, but her voice caught in her throat. Thomas rose calmly, his presence commanding. Your Honor, what my esteemed colleague fails to mention is the years of neglect, the violence, and the abandonment that brought us here. This isn't about biology. This is about safety. He began laying out evidence, police reports of domestic disturbances, medical records of injuries, sworn statements from neighbors. Each document hit like a hammer, the weight of truth piling higher. Anna's father shifted in his seat, his smirk fading. The aunt and uncle whispered frantically to one another, their masks beginning to crack. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. Mr. Miller, are you suggesting the child's relatives are unfit as well? Thomas's jaw tightened. I am not suggesting, Your Honor. I am stating, the child was placed in their care temporarily, and during that time, she was neglected, malnourished, and left to fend for her infant brothers. She came to my home seeking safety because she had none under their roof. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Anna's eyes darted nervously between the faces around her. She pressed Teddy closer, whispering into his worn ear. He's fighting for us. Then came the moment Thomas knew was inevitable. The opposing attorney rose. Your Honor, all of this is compelling, but it remains hearsay unless the child herself can confirm these claims. We request Anna be called to testify. Anna's heart stopped. She looked up at Thomas. Terror etched on her small face. Do I have to? She whispered. Thomas bent down, his voice low but steady. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But if you speak, they'll hear your truth. She looked down at Teddy, then back at him. Will you stay with me? Every second, he promised. Minutes later, Anna sat in the witness chair, her legs dangling, Teddy perched in her lap. Her voice shook as the judge addressed her. Anna, Do you understand why you're here today? She nodded, gripping Teddy tighter. Because they want to take me back. Do you want to go back? The judge asked gently. Tears filled her eyes. No. Because when Daddy yells, it's like thunder. And when Uncle drinks, it's worse than storms. They don't see me. They don't hear me. They don't care if I'm hungry, or if Teddy's broken, or if I cry. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. Mr. Miller. He stayed. When I had bad dreams, he didn't leave. He listened. And he promised I'd be safe. I believe him. No. The courtroom fell silent. Even the opposing attorney shifted uncomfortably. Judge Reynolds' stern expression softened as he tapped his gavel lightly. Thank you, Anna. That was very brave. She slid down from the chair and hurried back to Thomas, climbing into his arms with Teddy squished between them. Thomas held her tightly, whispering, You did more than enough. I'm proud of you. But even as relief flickered in his chest, he knew this was only the beginning. Custody battles were wars fought not in a single day but across weeks, sometimes months. And the man across the courtroom, Anna's father, wasn't finished. The fire had been lit. The storm was far from over. The courthouse air was heavy, thicker than before, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Thomas sat at the counsel's table, legal pads spread before him, his fountain pen poised to shred the opposition with precision. Across the aisle, Anna's father sat hunched, his jaw clenched, his eyes dark with something between anger and desperation. The aunt and uncle whispered urgently to their lawyer, their faces pale. Anna sat beside Thomas. Teddy balanced on her lap, her small fingers tracing the worn seams over and over. She had testified already, her voice shaking but unbroken. She had told the truth. Yet now, as lawyers prepared closing arguments, she sensed something darker hanging in the air. Thomas leaned down, his hand resting lightly on the edge of her chair. It's almost over, Anna. Just sit tight. I'm about to finish this. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. Finish it how? By making sure they can't come near you again, he said, his voice edged with steel. By destroying every shred of their case. Anna's heart thumped hard. Destroy, she whispered. Like, revenge? Thomas hesitated, surprised by the question. He opened his mouth to explain. But the judge called for closing remarks. He rose to his full height, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the center of the courtroom like a general entering battle. Your Honor, he began, his voice carrying authority. We've heard testimony, seen records, reviewed evidence. What we see here is not a father asking for redemption, it is a man trying to reclaim power he forfeited long ago. What we see is not an aunt and uncle offering care, it is exploitation, neglect, and cruelty. This child deserves safety. She deserves stability. And that does not exist in the home these people offer. He turned, his voice cutting sharper now, aimed squarely at the opposition. This is not about blood. This is about the duty to protect a child. And they have failed that duty. They do not deserve a second chance to fail her again. The words were like arrows, striking with precision. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Anna's father's face darkened with rage. The aunt bowed her head. Thomas turned back toward the judge. Give her to me. I will protect her. I will give her the life she was denied. It was powerful, fierce, everything a courtroom argument should be. And yet when Thomas returned to his seat, Anna was staring at him with troubled eyes. She hugged Teddy tighter, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Miller, please don't. Thomas blinked. Don't what? Don't destroy them, she said, tears brimming. Don't make this about revenge. His jaw tightened. Anna, this isn't revenge. This is justice. She shook her head. Justice doesn't have to be fire and shouting. Justice can be forgiveness too. Her tiny hand gripped his sleeve. Please, don't turn my childhood into anger. I don't want my story to be about hate. The words stopped him cold. In that moment, Thomas saw not just a child, but a kind of wisdom that cut deeper than all his years in court. Her innocence had been scarred, yes, but it had not been extinguished. She was asking him for something harder than victory. She was asking him to temper justice with mercy. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, do you wish to add anything further before I deliberate? Thomas stood slowly, his mind replaying Anna's plea. He glanced at her at the way she held Teddy as though the bear carried the weight of her soul and something inside him shifted. No, Your Honor, he said at last, his voice quieter than before. The child has spoken enough truth for all of us. I leave it in your hands. The courtroom hushed. Even the opposing counsel looked momentarily thrown off balance. Anna leaned against Thomas, whispering, "Thank you." He rested a hand lightly on her back. He had spent decades winning battles by being ruthless, relentless, unstoppable. But today, he had learned that sometimes the bravest fight was the one where you stepped back and let a child's fragile truth stand on its own. As the judge prepared to render his decision, Thomas realized something profound. Justice wasn't always about crushing the other side. Sometimes, justice was about honoring the voice of the smallest person in the room. The courtroom was silent except for the faint shuffle of papers as Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses. The air felt heavier than stone, pressing down on every heart in the room. Anna sat close to Thomas. Teddy clutched so tight his seams strained. She glanced up at the towering judge, her lip trembling. Thomas rested his hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her, though his own chest felt like a battlefield. The judge's voice rumbled through the chamber. This court has heard extensive testimony. We have seen evidence of neglect, abuse, and abandonment. Yet we've also heard the voice of a child, clear, honest, and powerful. And it is that voice this court cannot ignore. Murmurs spread across the gallery. Anna's father leaned forward suddenly, his face twisted in desperation. "She's my daughter. You can't just take her from me." His voice cracked, a raw mix of rage and despair. Judge Reynolds banged the gavel. "You will remain silent until I finish." But the man surged to his feet, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I made mistakes, yes, but I'm her blood. She belongs with me." His voice broke, and then to the shock of everyone, his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, his fists pounding against the wood as sobs tore from his throat. The aunt and uncle recoiled, their faces pale with embarrassment. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, Anna's wide eyes fixed on the man she had once called Daddy. She had seen him drunk, angry, violent. She had never seen him like this, broken. She turned to Thomas, whispering, "Why is he crying?" Thomas stared at the scene, his jaw tight. Because sometimes people only realize what they've lost when it's too late. Anna hugged Teddy closer, her small voice trembling. "Does that mean I have to forgive him?" Thomas looked at her, the question slicing through him. He wanted to say no, to shield her from the weight of pity, to declare that the man didn't deserve her forgiveness, but he saw the truth in Anna's eyes. She wasn't asking because she felt she owed it, she was asking because her heart, fragile yet strong, still sought to understand. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," Thomas said softly. "Forgiveness is a choice, Anna. It's yours, not his." The father's cries echoed against the marble walls. "Please, please, Anna, give me another chance." His voice was hoarse, pleading. Anna trembled, torn between fear and sorrow. Slowly, she turned her face into Thomas's side, whispering through tears, "I don't want to go back. I don't care if he cries. I just want to feel safe." Thomas wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "And you will," he murmured. The bailiff stepped forward, steadying the father and escorting him back to his seat. The courtroom quieted again. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses once more, his voice calm but firm. "This child has spoken. Her needs are clear. This is not a matter of punishment or revenge, it is a matter of protection." Anna glanced up at Thomas, her face streaked with tears. "Is it almost over?" Thomas brushed a curl from her forehead, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Almost, Anna. Almost." As the gavel echoed again, Thomas felt the weight of decades of battles pressing down on him. Yet this was different. This wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about the fragile heartbeat of a child who had chosen him over fear. And as Anna's father wept, broken in the eyes of the court, Thomas realized the true cost of justice. It wasn't just about the law. It was about the lives shattered in its pursuit. The air inside the courtroom was so still that even the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening. Anna sat beside Thomas, her small frame pressed tightly against him, Teddy squashed between them like a silent witness to everything that had unfolded. Judge Reynolds adjusted his glasses again, his eyes scanning the crowded room before settling on the little girl who had spoken with a courage few adults possessed. "This court," the judge began, his tone measured and deliberate, "has weighed both evidence and testimony. We have heard of violence, neglect, and abandonment. We have also heard of a child's deep fear and her equally deep longing for safety." Anna's hand tightened around Thomas's sleeve. He leaned down, his voice barely a whisper. "It's all right, Anna. Just listen." The judge cleared his throat. "It is the ruling of this court that custody of Anna Evans shall not be returned to her biological father or to her aunt and uncle. Effective immediately, full legal guardianship will be granted to Thomas Miller." Though, for a moment, the words hung in the air, almost unreal. Then the room erupted gasps from the gallery, angry muttering from the father's side, murmurs of relief from the social workers seated nearby. Anna's eyes widened, disbelief flooding her small face. He said your name," she whispered, looking up at Thomas. "Does that mean?" Thomas nodded slowly, his throat thick with emotion. "It means you're coming home with me." "Oh." Her lip quivered, and then she flung her arms around his neck. Teddy pressed between them, her voice cracked with joy and relief. "Dad, I can call you Dad now, can't I?" The word struck Thomas like a lightning bolt, shattering every wall he had built around his heart. For years, the title had been a ghost, a reminder of what he had lost. And now, spoken by this trembling child, it became something new, something alive. His eyes burned, and for once he did not hide it. He wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "Yes, Anna, you can." Across the aisle, her father surged to his feet, shouting, "This isn't over. She's my daughter. You can't steal her from me." His voice cracked, hoarse with fury and grief. The bailiff restrained him, and Judge Reynolds's gavel struck sharply. "Order! This court has spoken. If you continue, sir, you will be removed." Anna buried her face in Thomas's chest, trembling at the outburst. He held her tighter, shielding her from the storm. "Don't listen," he whispered into her hair. "You're safe. You're mine now." Mary Collins, the social worker, approached quietly once the gavel fell. She placed a gentle hand on Anna's shoulder. "You did very well today, sweetheart. You were brave." Anna peeked up, her face streaked with tears. "I don't feel brave. I just didn't want to go back." Mary smiled softly. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing of all, telling the truth about what you need." She turned to Thomas, her expression firm. "Mr. Miller, the court has granted guardianship, but the system will still monitor the transition. You understand the responsibility?" Thomas met her gaze with unwavering resolve. "I understand. And I accept it." As the courtroom emptied, Thomas carried Anna in his arms. She clung to him, her head resting on his shoulder, Teddy dangling from one hand. The weight of her was light, yet it felt like the heaviest and most precious responsibility he had ever carried. Outside, the crisp air of late autumn greeted them. Anna breathed it in, her chest rising as though she were taking her first free breath in years. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with something fragile but unmistakable hope. "Does this mean we're a family now?" she asked softly. Thomas's throat tightened. He glanced at the sky, then back at her. "Yes, Anna, it means exactly that." For the first time in a decade, Thomas Miller walked down the courthouse steps not as a man haunted by loss, but as a father reborn. The Miller mansion looked different when they returned from the courthouse. Though nothing about its architecture had changed, the tall windows still gleamed in the afternoon sun, the fountain still splashed gently in the front garden, and the great oak doors still stood as silent sentinels. But for Anna, clutching Teddy in one hand and Thomas's hand in the other, the house no longer looked like a stranger's fortress. It looked like home. Helen was waiting in the foyer, her sharp eyes already glistening with emotion. "Well?" she asked, wringing her hands on her apron. Thomas gave a short nod, his lips twitching into the faintest smile. It's official. She's mine. Helen let out a shaky laugh, her eyes brimming with relief. She bent down, arms wide. Come here, sweetheart. My. Anna ran forward and was enveloped in a warm hug that smelled faintly of flower and lavender. Teddy was squashed between them, but Anna didn't mind. For the first time in her short life, she felt embraced not just by arms but by safety itself. The days that followed unfolded in ways Anna could hardly believe. She had her own room now, a real room with a bed covered in quilts Helen had carefully chosen, shelves for books, and a small nightstand where Teddy sat proudly when she slept. The walls were painted a soft shade of yellow, and a vase of fresh flowers stood in the window. It wasn't just a room. It was hers. Thomas watched from the doorway that first night as Anna twirled slowly in the middle of the room, hugging Teddy to her chest. Is it really all mine? She whispered. All yours, Thomas confirmed. Her smile was small but radiant. Then Teddy says, this is the best day ever. Thomas chuckled, though his throat tightened at the sight. Then Teddy has good taste. Over the next weeks, life began to take on rhythms Thomas hadn't felt in years. Mornings were filled with the sound of small feet pattering down the stairs, afternoons with laughter in the garden. Anna insisted Teddy be buckled into the car whenever they went out, which made Helen shake her head fondly. But the moment that cemented their bond came on a crisp Saturday afternoon. Thomas had decided it was time for Anna to learn something every child should. How to ride a bike. The bike was small, painted blue, with training wheels attached. Anna eyed it with suspicion. What if I fall? She asked, hugging Teddy under one arm. You will, Thomas said matter-of-factly. But that's how you learn. Her eyes widened. That's not very encouraging. He crouched down so they were eye to eye. I'm not promising you won't fall, Anna. I'm promising that if you do, I'll be right here to pick you up. She considered this, then gave a small nod. Okay, but Teddy watches first. She set the bear carefully on the porch, propping him so he could see. Thomas steadied the bike as Anna climbed on. Her legs wobbled, her grip on the handlebars tight. Ready? He asked. Ready, she whispered, though her voice trembled. He gave the bike a gentle push, jogging beside her as she pedaled clumsily. The wheels wobbled dangerously, and within seconds she toppled over into the grass. Anna sat up, cheeks flushed, eyes brimming with tears. I can't do it. Thomas crouched beside her, brushing grass from her sweater. Yes, you can. You just did. Falling is part of it. She sniffled, glaring at the bike. It's mean. Bikes aren't mean. They're just stubborn. Kind of like lawyers. He added with a small smile. That earned him a giggle through her tears. She wiped her nose on her sleeve and stood again. Okay. But only because Teddy says try again. The second attempt was better. The third was even better than that. By the fourth, Anna was pedaling on her own for a few glorious seconds before tumbling into the grass again. This time she laughed as she fell. Thomas stood watching, his chest swelling with something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Real, unfiltered pride. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Anna curled up on the couch beside him, Teddy in her lap. Today was the best, she whispered sleepily. Thomas looked down at her, brushing a curl from her forehead. There will be many more days like this. Her eyelids fluttered shut, and her small voice drifted into the quiet. I love you, Dad. The words landed softly yet powerfully, filling the hollow spaces in his heart that grief had carved years ago. He kissed the top of her head and whispered, I love you too, Anna. And for the first time in a decade, Thomas Miller felt the true weight and the true joy of being a father. The Miller mansion had grown warmer in the weeks since the court's decision. What was once a hollow museum of grief now echoed with the sound of small footsteps, bursts of laughter, and Teddy's muffled role in countless conversations. Thomas found himself adjusting in ways he never expected, moving fragile vases higher out of reach, learning that bedtime stories demanded voices for every character, and realizing his schedule bent easily when a little girl asked, Can you just stay with me a bit longer? But even as new life filled the house, old ghosts lingered. One evening, Thomas was in the study, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. A storm had rolled in, rain pelting against the tall windows, thunder shaking the glass. Anna sat curled in the armchair across from him, Teddy tucked beneath her chin. She was supposed to be reading a book Helen had given her, but her eyes kept straying to the portraits on the mantel, portraits of Lily and his late wife. Finally, she asked, her voice quiet. "Do you miss them?" Thomas's throat tightened. His instinct was to deflect, to lock those memories back in the vault where they had been for years. But Anna's eyes were steady, filled with a trust he could not betray. "Yes," he admitted softly, "every day." She hugged Teddy closer. "Were they like me?" He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Lily was about your age when I lost her. She was bright, always curious. And her mother? She was the kindest person I ever knew." His voice faltered, and he looked away. "Losing them nearly broke me." The room was silent except for the storm outside. Then Anna whispered, "Do you think they'd like me?" The question cut deeper than any courtroom cross-examination. Thomas stood and walked to the mantel, lifting the photo of Lily with her pink rabbit. He studied it for a long moment, then turned back to Anna. "Yes, I think they would love you, just like I do." Anna's eyes filled, and she slid off the chair, padding barefoot across the carpet. She hugged his waist tightly, Teddy squished between them. "Then maybe we can all be family together, even if they're not here anymore." Thomas placed a trembling hand on her curls, his chest aching. "Yes, Anna, we already are." But as the storm raged on, his mind wrestled with shadows. He had promised her safety, but the threats weren't gone. Her father's outburst in court still echoed in his ears. Men like that didn't just disappear quietly. A week later, his fears proved right. He was walking Anna home from the park, the crisp autumn air swirling with leaves. She skipped ahead a few steps, Teddy dangling from her arm, her laughter ringing across the empty street. For a moment, Thomas allowed himself to relax. Then a car pulled up beside them, its engine growling low. The window rolled down. It was him. Anna froze, her laughter cut short, her face draining of color. "Anna!" her father shouted from the car. His voice was hoarse, desperate. "Get in. We're going home." Thomas's body went cold. He stepped instantly between Anna and the car, his stance firm, protective. "You're violating a court order. Leave, now." The man's face twisted with rage. "She's mine. You can't keep her forever." "You think a piece of paper changes blood?" Anna whimpered, clutching Thomas's sleeve. "Don't let him take me, Dad. Please." Thomas's voice was ice. "She's not going anywhere with you." The car idled, tension crackling in the air like the storm that had passed days before. For a long moment, it seemed violence might erupt right there in the street. Then, with a curse, the man slammed the wheel, the car screeching as it tore away. Thomas knelt, pulling Anna into his arms. She was shaking. Teddy clutched between them. "It's okay," he whispered, though his own heart thundered. "I've got you. I won't let him touch you." She buried her face in his shoulder, whispering into his coat, "I believe you." But as Thomas carried her home, his mind sharpened with resolve. This wasn't over. Her father's shadow still loomed, and Thomas would need every ounce of strength, both as a lawyer and as a man, to keep his promise. The days following the encounter at the park were uneasy. Anna rarely let go of Thomas's hand when they left the mansion, and Teddy, already threadbare, looked more battered than ever from her constant clutching. The house, once filled with her cautious laughter, now echoed again with the quiet weight of fear. Thomas doubled security around the property, instructing guards to patrol the gates, the garden, even the driveway. Helen noticed the change in the child immediately. "She startles at every sound," she whispered to Thomas one evening in the kitchen. "She won't even go upstairs alone." Thomas pressed a hand against his forehead, exhaustion pressing into his bones. "I should have anticipated this. He won't stop until he feels he's taken back control." Helen's eyes softened. then you need to make him stop. For her, that night, Thomas sat in his study, documents spread across his desk. He wasn't reviewing case law, he was building a shield, an arsenal of restraining orders, contempt motions, and injunctions. But more than that, he was preparing for something he couldn't put on paper. The possibility that Anna's father might force a confrontation that no courtroom could resolve. The breaking point came sooner than he expected. It was a Saturday afternoon. Anna had been coloring at the kitchen table. Teddy propped beside her, a mug of warm cocoa at her elbow. Thomas stood at the counter, watching her small brow furrow with concentration as she filled a page with messy, hopeful rainbows. Then the alarm sounded. A shrill, piercing wail echoed through the house. The motion sensors at the gate had been triggered. Thomas's heart clenched. He sprinted toward the security monitors in the hall, Anna's frightened voice calling after him. On the screen, a figure staggered up the driveway. It was him, her father, disheveled, drunk, his shirt half untucked, his face wild with fury. He slammed his fists against the locked gate, shouting incoherent words that the intercom barely picked up. Anna appeared beside Thomas, her small hands gripping his sleeve. "It's him," she whispered, trembling. "He found us." Thomas scooped her into his arms and turned sharply to Helen. "Take her upstairs. Lock the door. Don't open it until I say." Anna clung to him. "No, don't leave me. Izir." He looked into her terrified eyes, steadying his voice. "Anna, listen to me. I need you safe. The only way I can fight for you is if you're upstairs, where he can't reach you. Do you trust me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. After a long pause, she whispered, "Yes." He kissed her forehead, then passed her gently to Helen. "Go." When the door shut behind them, Thomas turned back to the monitors, his jaw set. He strode to the intercom, pressing the button. "You're trespassing. Leave now, or the police will drag you off in handcuffs." The man bellowed back, voice slurred but vicious. "She's mine, Miller. You think you can steal my blood? You'll regret this." Thomas's voice dropped to steel. "She's not yours anymore. And if you come one step closer, you'll regret it." But instead of retreating, the man grabbed the gate, shaking it violently. "Anna, baby girl, Daddy's here." Upstairs, Anna heard his voice echo through the mansion walls. She pressed Teddy to her chest, whispering through sobs, "Don't listen, Teddy. He's lying. Dad said I'm safe. He promised." Down below, Thomas signaled the guards. The police had already been called, but every second felt like an eternity. He stood at the edge of the driveway, rain beginning to fall, his frame silhouetted against the gray sky. The man on the other side of the gate glared at him, face twisted with rage. "You think you're her savior?" the father spat. "You're nothing. She'll always be mine." Thomas didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his voice rising above the storm. "No, she will never be yours again. You broke that right the day you raised your hand to her. You don't own her. You don't deserve her. She is not yours, she is mine." The words rang out like a gavel striking wood, final and absolute. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights flashed as police vehicles tore down the street, skidding to a stop by the gate. Officers surrounded the man, restraining him as he thrashed and shouted. Thomas stood still, rain soaking his suit, his fists clenched at his sides. Only when the police car finally pulled away did he turn back toward the house. Upstairs, Anna waited with Helen, her small hands still trembling. When Thomas entered the room, dripping wet, she ran to him, Teddy bouncing in her grip. "Is he gone?" she whispered. Thomas knelt, pulling her into his arms. "He's gone, Anna, and he's not coming back." Her tears soaked his shoulder, but her voice was steady when she whispered, "You kept your promise." Thomas held her tighter than ever before. He had faced countless battles in his life, but this was the one that had mattered most. And though the storm still rumbled outside, in his heart he knew this was the breaking point. And he had chosen not to break. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the Miller estate bathed in soft, silver light. The fountain in the front garden bubbled calmly. It sounded like a lullaby after weeks of tension. Inside the mansion, the air felt different, lighter, quieter, almost sacred. For the first time since Anna had arrived, there was no looming threat, no footsteps at the gate, no echoes of shouting in the hall, only the smell of pancakes and the faint hum of a radio in the kitchen. Anna sat at the kitchen table in her pajamas, Teddy perched beside her plate like always. But this morning she wasn't just clutching him for comfort, she was smiling. Helen, bustling at the stove, caught the expression and paused. "Well, would you look at that?" she murmured, setting down the spatula. "I've been waiting to see that smile." Anna glanced at her shyly. "I didn't think I could smile again." Helen brushed a stray curl from Anna's forehead. "Children always find their way back to smiles when they're safe." Thomas appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, his usual suit replaced by a soft sweater and slacks. He looked tired, but in a different way, a good tired. Like a man who'd spent all night keeping watch and found it worth it. Anna's eyes lit up. "You're not going to court today?" He shook his head. "Not today. Today's just for us." She grinned wider, hugging Teddy. "Then Teddy says it's going to be the best day." After breakfast, Thomas led Anna out to the garden. The air was cool and clean, the grass wet with dew. The fountain sparkled as sunlight caught the drops spraying from its edge. Anna approached it slowly, holding Teddy up like a talisman. "Remember when I told you fountains make wishes?" she asked. Thomas nodded. "I remember." She closed her eyes, whispering something Thomas couldn't hear, then tossed a small coin into the water. The ripples spread outward, catching the morning light. "What did you wish for?" he asked softly. Anna opened her eyes, smiling. "Nothing. I already got it." His throat tightened. He crouched down so they were face to face. "And what did you get?" She placed a small hand on his cheek. "A dad who stays." For a moment Thomas couldn't speak. He simply gathered her into his arms, Teddy squished between them. "I'm not going anywhere," he murmured. "Not now. Not ever." No. Later that afternoon, Helen surprised Anna with a celebration balloons tied to the chairs, a small cake with "Welcome Home Anna" scrawled in pink frosting. The kitchen, once quiet and formal, rang with laughter. Anna blew out the candle, squeezing her eyes shut, as if sealing the moment into memory. "Did you make a wish?" Thomas asked, smiling at her across the table. She shook her head, crumbs clinging to her lips. "Nope. I told you. I don't need to anymore." Nah. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the house settled into its new rhythm, Thomas sat at the foot of Anna's bed. The lamp cast a warm glow over the soft yellow walls, the shelves of books, and Teddy resting on the nightstand. Anna was under the covers, her eyelids heavy but her smile still there. "Can you tell me a story?" she asked sleepily. Thomas tilted his head. "What kind of story?" "One where the little girl is safe," she murmured, "and where the grown-up doesn't leave." He smiled faintly. "I think we're already living that one." She reached out, touching his hand. "Then tell me the ending." He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "The ending is this. The little girl grows up safe and loved, and she never has to be afraid again, and the grown-up who thought he'd lost everything finds out he didn't lose it all. He just hadn't found her yet." Anna's eyes fluttered shut, her breathing evening out as she drifted into sleep. Teddy sat watch beside her like a worn, loyal sentinel. Thomas remained there for a while, listening to the sound of her quiet breaths, the house now full of a life he thought he would never feel again. He stood, switching off the lamp, and whispered into the dim room, "Good night, Anna. Welcome home." As he closed the door, the weight of the past seemed to slip from his shoulders. The ghosts still lingered, but they no longer ruled him. He had found a way to live again, not through wealth or success or the cases he'd won, but through the trust of a little girl clutching a ragged bear. In the quiet after the storm, Thomas Miller finally understood. He hadn't rescued Anna alone. She had rescued him too. This story reminds us that family is not defined by blood alone, but by love, protection, and presence. True justice is not about revenge, it is about giving the vulnerable a safe place to belong. In choosing to fight for Anna, Thomas discovered that rescuing a child was also the path to rescuing his own broken heart. The lesson is clear. Sometimes, the greatest healing comes when we dare to stay, when we choose compassion over fear, and when we decide that promises must be kept.